There are entire civilizations that vanished so completely that history itself almost erased them. No monuments remain standing. No armies survived to tell their version of events. No descendants carried their names into the modern world. Only fragments endured, broken tablets buried beneath desert sands, abandoned roads consumed by forests, and whispers hidden inside the myths of other empires that came later. For centuries, humanity walked over the ruins of forgotten cultures without realizing entire worlds had once existed beneath their feet. Some disappeared through conquest, others collapsed slowly under famine, climate shifts, disease, or political fragmentation. But the most disturbing truth is that many of these societies did not recognize their own collapse while it was happening. Their markets still opened, their rulers still gave speeches, their people still believed tomorrow would arrive exactly as yesterday had, but no one understood what was coming next. Long before the rise of Rome or the expansion of medieval kingdoms, vast civilizations already dominated trade routes, agriculture, astronomy, and urban planning across regions now reduced to silence. In the dense jungles of Central America, immense cities emerged with pyramids aligned to celestial movements so precise they still challenge modern researchers. In the deserts of Africa, kingdoms controlled rivers and gold routes that shaped economies thousands of kilometers away. Along forgotten coastlines in Asia, advanced societies built ports, irrigation systems, and bureaucracies, while much of the world remained fragmented into tribes. These cultures were not primitive shadows waiting for real civilization to arrive. They were organized, sophisticated, and deeply interconnected systems sustained by ritual, labor, and collective belief. Yet their stories nearly disappeared because history is often written by those who survive, not by those who vanish beneath the weight of time. For ordinary people living inside these civilizations, collapse rarely looked dramatic in the beginning. The morning still smelled of bread ovens and wet soil. Merchants still argued in crowded streets, while children chased each other through markets filled with spices, fabrics, and smoke from cooking fires. Priests continued ceremonies inside temples lit by flickering oil lamps. Farmers still watched the skies for rain and followed traditions passed down through generations. Most people never imagined they were living near the end of their civilization's existence. Empires do not announce their deaths. They decay quietly beneath routines that appear permanent. A failed harvest becomes an inconvenience instead of a warning. Political disputes feel temporary. Small migrations seem manageable. But the collapse did not begin with chaos. It began quietly, hidden inside patterns so gradual that almost nobody noticed the foundations were weakening beneath them. In many lost civilizations, the first invisible cracks appeared far away from palaces or battlefields. Rivers changed direction, forests disappeared under relentless expansion, soil lost fertility after generations of overuse, seasonal rains became unpredictable. These changes did not destroy societies overnight, but they slowly increased pressure on systems designed for stability. Food became slightly more expensive, trade caravans arrived less frequently, local governors demanded heavier taxes to compensate for shortages. And because these civilizations depended on rigid hierarchies, the burden almost always fell upon ordinary laborers first. Archaeological evidence reveals moments when nutrition declined, fortifications expanded, and religious sacrifices intensified during periods of environmental stress. By the time the signs became clear, it was already too late. Entire populations had already entered a cycle of scarcity and instability from which recovery became increasingly difficult. The ancient Maya civilization remains one of the clearest examples of how complexity itself can become a civilization's greatest vulnerability. Their cities once dominated vast regions with extraordinary achievements in mathematics, astronomy, and architecture. Towering pyramids rose above jungle canopies, while rulers claimed divine authority over millions. But beneath this grandeur, growing populations placed enormous pressure on agriculture and water supplies. Deforestation accelerated across entire regions as cities expanded and monumental construction intensified. Then prolonged droughts began to strike repeatedly. Reservoirs dried, crops failed, trade weakened, and political rivalries transformed into violent conflict between competing city-states. Yet even during this decline, monuments continued to be built, ceremonies continued, elites maintained appearances while the population beneath them faced mounting desperation. The system was consuming itself while pretending to remain eternal. Far from the jungles of the Americas, another forgotten power disappeared beneath the shifting sands of North Africa. The Garamantian civilization flourished deep inside the Sahara, building sophisticated underground irrigation tunnels capable of sustaining cities in one of the harshest environments on Earth. For centuries, they controlled trade routes connecting sub-Saharan Africa to Mediterranean empires. Their wealth depended entirely on hidden water reserves trapped beneath the desert, but those reserves were finite. As populations grew and agriculture expanded, ancient aquifers began to decline faster than nature could replenish them. Wells deepened, water became scarce, agricultural production weakened year after year. The desert did not conquer them suddenly, it advanced slowly, almost invisibly, until the infrastructure sustaining their civilization could no longer support life at the scale they had created. Eventually, entire settlements were abandoned to silence and sand. One of the most haunting patterns repeated throughout lost civilizations is how leaders often intensified existing problems while attempting to preserve stability. When shortages appeared, taxes increased. When unrest spread, governments expanded military control. When faith weakened, rulers demanded larger monuments, greater rituals, and stricter obedience. These reactions sometimes created the illusion of strength while accelerating internal collapse. Archaeologists studying the final phases of multiple ancient societies consistently find evidence of increasing inequality near the end. Massive construction projects continued, even as common populations suffered malnutrition. Elites protected symbols of power, while the systems feeding ordinary citizens deteriorated. But no empire believes itself fragile. The greater the civilization, the harder it becomes for those inside it to imagine permanent decline. And that blindness often becomes part of the collapse itself. The Indus Valley civilization once contained some of the most advanced urban centers of the ancient world. Cities like Mohenjo-Daro displayed planned streets, drainage systems, public baths, and remarkable engineering thousands of years before many later empires emerged. Yet despite this sophistication, the civilization gradually disappeared from historical memory. No massive invasion destroyed it in a single catastrophic event. Instead, evidence suggests environmental shifts altered river systems that sustained agriculture and trade across the region. Economic networks weakened. Populations slowly dispersed into smaller settlements. Urban centers emptied over generations rather than days. This slow unraveling makes the story especially disturbing because it reveals how civilizations can fade without dramatic final battles. Sometimes collapse is not an explosion. Sometimes it is exhaustion stretched across decades, until people abandon the structures that once defined their entire world. Across the Pacific Ocean, the people of Easter Island created colossal stone statues that still stand as silent witnesses to a vanished society. For generations, these communities transported enormous monoliths across the island, using immense amounts of labor and natural resources. Forests were gradually cut down to sustain construction, transportation, and survival itself. But as deforestation accelerated, ecological balance collapsed. Soil erosion increased. Fishing became harder without adequate wood for boats. Food scarcity intensified competition between clans already under pressure. Oral histories describe violence, internal conflict, and social fragmentation during the island's decline. What makes the story unforgettable is the contrast between human ambition and environmental limitation. Even while resources disappeared, construction of the statues continued. The civilization remained focused on preserving symbolic power, while the material foundations of survival disappeared around them. Governments continue projecting confidence, while systems deteriorate internally. Citizens adapt gradually to worsening conditions, until instability becomes routine. History shows that collapse often feels ordinary while it unfolds. There is rarely a single moment when everyone suddenly realizes the world they know is ending. Instead, recognition arrives afterward, when abandoned streets fill with dust, and future generations attempt to understand how powerful societies disappeared despite all their knowledge, infrastructure, and ambition. The ruins left behind are not only remnants of the past, they are warnings preserved in stone, silence, and absence. Today, satellites scan deserts, where forgotten kingdoms once controlled trade routes linking continents. Archaeologists uncover traces of civilizations hidden beneath modern farmland and expanding cities. Scientists analyze ancient pollen, climate records, and human remains, searching for answers buried for thousands of years. Yet the deeper researchers look into lost cultures, the more they uncover a pattern that feels disturbingly familiar. Environmental strain, political fragmentation, misinformation, inequality, overexpansion, and dependence on fragile systems appear again and again throughout history. The names change, the technologies evolve, but the structure of collapse often remains the same. And perhaps that is why these forgotten civilizations continue haunting the modern world. Because beneath the dust of vanished empires lies a possibility humanity has never fully escaped. The realization that even the greatest societies can disappear while believing they are invincible.